Listen, right now there is someone in your life who feels furious. Not because you did something wrong, but because you stopped doing something right for them. Clears throat. You stopped being easy. You said no, or you said not anymore, or you simply stopped jumping whenever they called. And the reaction you got was not calm. It was not understanding. It was not, okay, I respect that. It was something that felt almost like punishment, like a switch suddenly flipped, like a version of them you had never seen just walked into the room. And now you are sitting there asking yourself if you caused this. Did I go too far? Was I wrong for changing? You were not wrong, but you were unprepared. Because nobody really tells you what happens when you start holding your ground. People who are used to accessing you easily do not respond to boundaries with instant respect. Instead, they often respond with a pattern, a kind of sequence that feels deliberate, almost calculated, designed to make you second-guess your decision to become harder to use. And if you do not recognize what is happening, you can end up handing your power straight back just to escape the discomfort. A lot of advice makes it sound simple. Just set boundaries. Just hold your ground and everything will adjust on its own. But that is incomplete. Holding your ground only works when you understand what pressure is coming after it. Without that awareness, even strong boundaries can start to crack. What follows are the common stages that often appear when someone stops being easy to access, especially in toxic dynamics. These are patterns. Not every person will show all of them, but when they do appear, they tend to appear in this order. And the key is not just recognizing them, but knowing how not to get pulled off your position by them. The first move is the pressure test. This usually shows up quickly, sometimes within hours after you set a limit. They do not accept the new version of you quietly. Instead, they push. Not because they did not hear you, but because they are checking if you really mean it. Most people who push boundaries understand one thing very well. Many limits are not actually firm. They are flexible. So, the only way to know if yours is real is to apply pressure and observe your reaction. This is not usually dramatic at first. It can sound soft, reasonable, even slightly confused. You might hear things like, "Are you sure? It is not a big deal. I really need you right now." Or, "Are you really going to say no to this?" Then it slowly escalates. The tone shifts, the urgency increases. The discomfort builds. What is actually happening is simple. They are testing whether your number is stable or negotiable. Because in the past, they have likely seen that persistence works. If they push long enough, your resistance used to soften. So, what is the response when this happens? It is not more explanation. It is not more justification. It is consistency. Something simple like, "My answer has not changed." No extra reasoning. No emotional defense. Just stability. Because anything you add becomes another angle for negotiation. And if that pressure does not work, the pattern often shifts into something else. The second move is the victim flip. This one is especially powerful if you are an empathetic person. It works by taking your boundary and reframing it as harm you are causing them. Suddenly, your self-protection becomes cruelty. Your number becomes betrayal. And the situation gets emotionally reversed without anything actually changing in reality. You might hear things like, "I cannot believe you're doing this to me. I thought you cared about me. I have always been there for you. I would never treat you like this." The emotional tone is designed to create guilt, not clarity. And if you are someone who cares about others, your nervous system reacts quickly. You feel the discomfort of possibly hurting someone. And that discomfort can start pulling you back toward compliance just to stop the emotional tension. But what is important to understand is this: your empathy is not the issue. Empathy is a strength. The issue is that in toxic dynamics, empathy is often studied and used as a lever. The emotional reaction you naturally have is anticipated and activated on purpose. In this stage, the goal is to make you feel like maintaining your boundary is the same as being a bad person. And once that belief enters your mind, your decision starts to weaken from the inside. A grounded response here does not dismiss their feelings, but it also does not surrender your position. Something like, "I understand that this is upsetting for you, but my decision stays the same." You acknowledge emotion without abandoning clarity, because it is possible to care about someone and still not give them what they want from you. Those two things can exist at the same time. If that does not bring you back, the pattern can escalate outward. The third move is the recruitment drive. This is where things shift from direct pressure to indirect pressure. Instead of trying to change their mind themselves, they start involving other people. This is often the most confusing stage because suddenly you are not only dealing with them anymore. You are dealing with messages coming through friends, family members, colleagues, or mutual connections. You might start hearing things like, "They seem really hurt. They reached out to me. I think you should talk to them." Or, "Everyone just wants this to be okay again." It feels like the situation has expanded beyond you. What is actually happening is framing. Their version of events is being shared in a way that positions them as the hurt party and you as the one who created distance. People who care about both sides naturally start applying pressure to fix it. The important point here is that these people are usually not malicious. They are being used as messengers without realizing it. And in this stage, over-explaining becomes a trap. The more you try to correct every detail, the more you get pulled into defending yourself in a space that is already biased by one side of the story. A grounded response is simple and contained. Something like, "I appreciate you checking in, but this is between me and them. I am handling it." No long explanations. No emotional breakdown of history. Just containment. If the recruitment does not restore access, the dynamic can shift again. The fourth move is the contempt switch. This one is different in tone. It is no longer about pulling you back. It is about pushing you away. The warmth disappears. The friendliness fades. And in its place, you get distance, coldness, and sometimes subtle dismissal. Not always open hostility, but a clear emotional withdrawal that you can feel immediately. You might notice they act like you are not as important anymore, or they interact with you in a way that feels deliberately flat, not dramatic. Not loud, just empty in a way that stands out. This is often used socially as well, especially in group settings. The goal is to create discomfort, to make your position feel socially or emotionally expensive, as if holding your boundary has now other you access to connection. And that discomfort can be very effective if you interpret it as proof that you made a mistake. But what is really happening here is a shift in strategy. When access does not work, pressure does not work, and recruitment does not work. The dynamic often moves into withdrawal and coldness as a form of control through absence rather than pursuit. And this is usually where the real test happens internally. Not what they are doing, but whether you interpret their shift as a reason to undo your boundary. Because at every stage, the pattern is not random. It is designed to create doubt, emotional pressure, and reconsideration. And if you do not know the pattern, it can feel personal, unpredictable, and overwhelming. But when you can recognize it for what it is, it becomes something else entirely. A sequence you can observe without being pulled out of your position. The goal is not to fight every move. The goal is to stay clear enough to not be moved by them. They speak to everyone around you with the same ease they once had with you. They act as if you are no longer fully in their world, like your presence has been reduced from someone important to something. Background and unnoticed, and something tightens in your chest, not because you miss the dynamic itself, but because you miss being acknowledged. Because being ignored by someone who once seemed to need you so strongly feels like a judgment, like the version of you that stood your ground made everything worse. And then your mind starts questioning everything. Did I cause this? Did I push too far? Was it wrong for me to change? You were not wrong, but you were not prepared for what comes after boundaries are set with people who benefited from you not having any. Because the truth is, people who are used to having easy access to you rarely respond to boundaries with immediate understanding. Instead, what often follows is a pattern, a predictable sequence of reactions that feels intentional because in many cases it is. It is not random emotional chaos. It is a set of behaviors designed to pull you back into the version of yourself that was easier for them to access. And if you do not recognize the pattern, you can end up doubting yourself so much that you undo your own progress just to make the discomfort stop. A lot of advice makes boundaries sound simple. Just say no. Just stand for. Just be consistent. But that leaves out a very important part. Holding a boundary is not just about setting it. It is about enduring what comes after it without losing your center. Because what comes after is often pressure, confusion, emotional reversal, and sometimes withdrawal. And without awareness, each of those can feel like a reason to reconsider yourself. So, Here is what actually tends to happen in these dynamics step by step when someone realizes you are no longer as accessible as you used to be. The first stage is the pressure test. This usually comes quickly, sometimes within hours. They do not immediately accept your boundary as final. Instead, they push against it to see if it bends. This is not always aggressive at first. It can sound reasonable, even casual, but underneath it is a clear intention. They are checking whether your number is firm or flexible, because in their experience, many limits are not truly fixed. Many are emotional, temporary, or dependent on how much pressure is applied. So, they apply pressure to measure resistance. You might hear repeated requests, reframed questions, emotional reasoning, or increased urgency. The tone often shifts from mild to insistent, and what they are really looking for is the moment you soften. The key here is not to over-explain. The more you justify, the more material they have to work with. What holds the line is consistency. A simple, steady response like "my answer is still the same." No added emotion, no extended explanation, just stability. Because boundaries are not proven in the moment they are spoken. They are proven in the moment they are tested. If that does not work, the dynamic often shifts. The second stage is the victim reversal. This is where your boundary gets reframed as harm. Suddenly, you are not the person setting a limit, you are the person causing pain. What you experience here is an emotional inversion. Your number becomes their injury. Your self-protection becomes their abandonment. You might hear statements that appeal directly to guilt, things like, "I cannot believe you are doing this to me," or "After everything I've done for you," or "I never thought you would treat me like this." And if you are someone who is naturally empathetic, this stage hits hard, because your ability to feel for others is being activated in the exact direction that benefits them. But what is important to understand is that empathy itself is not the problem. The problem is when empathy is redirected into self-abandonment. In these moments, the goal is to make you feel like maintaining your boundary equals hurting someone. And once that connection is formed in your mind, your decision starts to feel morally uncomfortable. A grounded response does not deny emotion, but it does not surrender to it either. Something like, "I understand this is upsetting, but my decision remains the same." You acknowledge without collapsing your boundary, because caring about someone does not require undoing yourself for them. If emotional reversal does not work, the pattern often expands outward. The third stage is the recruitment phase. This is where the situation stops being contained between two people and starts involving others. Instead of continuing direct pressure, they begin speaking to people around you. Friends, mutual connections, family members, colleagues, not always in an obvious or accusatory way, but in a framing way. You might suddenly start receiving messages from others asking what happened, expressing concern, or trying to mediate. And it can feel like the situation has gotten thrown beyond your control. What is actually happening is that a narrative is being distributed, one that positions them as hurt, confused, or wronged, and you as the source of that disruption. Most people who get pulled into this are not trying to take sides. They are trying to reduce tension, but in doing so, they unknowingly amplify pressure on you. This is why over-explaining becomes dangerous here, because you are not just responding to one person anymore. You are responding to a version of the story that has already been shaped. A grounded response stays simple. Something like, "I hear you, but this is something I am handling directly." No deep defense, no emotional unpacking, just containment. If recruitment does not shift your position, the tone often changes again. The fourth stage is the contempt shift. This is where the emotional temperature drops. The warmth disappears, the openness fades, and instead you are met with distance that feels intentional. It is not always overt hostility. It is often subtle detachment, short responses, reduced engagement, a lack of acknowledgement that feels very specific. You may notice they act differently around you in group settings if you are no longer fully included in the same emotional space. This shift is often designed to create discomfort, because discomfort can be used as pressure. It makes you question whether your boundary has cost you connection, respect, or belonging. And for many people, that question becomes heavier than the original conflict. But what is really happening here is not loss of connection. It is withdrawal of familiarity as a form of influence. And if that does not restore access, another stage can appear. The fifth stage is the strategic disappearance. This is not a brief pause or emotional cooling off. This is extended silence, intentional absence, and removal of presence. No messages, no updates, no interaction, just distance. And what makes this stage powerful is not what they are doing, but what your mind starts doing with it. You begin filling in the silence. You start replaying events. You start wondering if you caused harm. You start questioning whether you should reach out just to make sure everything is okay. And that internal discomfort is exactly what the silence is designed to generate. Because while you are sitting in uncertainty, they are not necessarily suffering from it. They are waiting for your reaction. This is where attachment becomes pressure. The longer the silence continues, the more your mind tries to resolve it by reconnecting. But a stable response here is internal, not external. Something like, their silence is information in itself. It does not require me to chase clarity. Because silence that appears only when you stop complying is not neutral. It is part of the pattern. And if that does not pull you back, the final stage often appears. The sixth stage is the reset attempt. This is where everything suddenly returns to normal. They come back warm, familiar, casual, as if nothing happened. As if the pressure, the reversal, the recruitment, the distance, and the silence were never part of the interaction. And this is where things become most confusing. Because part of you wants relief. You want resolution. You want things to feel normal again. But the danger is in accepting normal without acknowledgement. Because if nothing is addressed, nothing is resolved. It is simply paused. And what was not resolved will repeat. A grounded response does not reject connection, but it does not erase history either. Something like, I'm glad that. NGs feel calmer, but what happens still needs to be acknowledged. Because real repair does not skip over impact, it includes it. And when you step back and look at all of this together, what becomes clear is that this is not random behavior. It is a pattern of escalation and adjustment. A system of testing, reversing, recruiting, withdrawing, and resetting. And when you are inside it, each stage can feel separate. But when you see it fully, it becomes easier to recognize it for what it is. Not confusion, not coincidence, but repetition. And once you can see the pattern, you are no longer reacting blindly to each moment as if it is new. You are observing it as part of something you have already seen. And that changes everything about how much power it has over you.